The world today feels more dangerous than ever before, as people all over the globe wake up every morning not to check the weather or scroll through fun videos, but to look at alerts and warnings on their phones that tell them if they are safe or in danger. In many places, governments are no longer using calm words to solve problems. Instead, they are making strong statements, showing power, and even preparing for fights that could hurt many people. This story will tell you what is happening around the world using simple English words and easy sentences, so that you can learn English while also understanding some of the serious things happening today. We will not use big or difficult words, but we will still give you strong and powerful ideas that help you think. So sit back, listen carefully, and ask yourself this question: are we getting closer to a world war, or can the world still find peace? The year is 2025, and something has changed in the world. People can feel it in the air, in the news, and even in their homes, because everywhere they look, something dangerous is happening. Instead of watching funny videos or checking news about sports, many people now use their phones to see if their country is under threat or if a new war has started somewhere. In many countries, leaders do not speak with kind or polite words anymore, but instead talk about power, weapons, and revenge. In the Middle East, the situation has become very serious, as missiles fly between the countries of Israel and Iran almost every day, and the sound of explosions has become something normal in some areas. But that is not the only place where trouble is growing, because far away in Eastern Europe, the country of Russia is making moves that are worrying the whole world again. Russia, which has already fought a long and painful war in Ukraine, is now trying to push its borders even further, and many small countries near Russia are starting to feel very afraid. In places like Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia, people are asking if they will be next, and the leaders of NATO are holding fast meetings to discuss what to do if Russia makes another big move. At the same time, in the Red Sea, which is near the countries of Yemen and Saudi Arabia, another kind of danger is growing. A group called the Houthis in Yemen has started using drones to attack ships that carry food, oil, and goods from one continent to another, and this has made the sea, which is supposed to be peaceful and used for trade, into a place of fear and fire. These attacks have made other countries worry that soon, no one will be able to send or receive the things they need to live and work. In the United States, the president and his top advisors are meeting in secret rooms, talking about these three major dangers, and asking themselves if all of this means the world is moving toward not one, not two, but maybe three different wars at the same time. One general in the meeting asks, "Are we going to fight on three fronts?" But no one answers him, because sometimes the truth is so big and so scary that people don't even want to speak it out loud. To really understand how this all began, we have to go back and look at the long history between Iran and Israel, because their relationship has been full of hate, fear, and secret fights for many years. In April of 2025, something very serious happened. Iran launched a huge attack on Tel Aviv, and in response, Israel attacked back with great force. But instead of being afraid, Iran became louder, stronger, and more ready to fight. Meanwhile, Russia, even though it lost many soldiers in Ukraine, has now created new partnerships with countries like China and Iran, and even has quiet friendships with the Houthis in Yemen. Together, these groups have a common idea: they do not want the United States to be the most powerful country in the world anymore. In Yemen, the Houthis now feel proud and powerful because they used to fight alone, but now they are getting weapons and support from other countries, and they feel like they are part of something bigger. They are attacking American ships and saying, "We are not afraid anymore." In Europe, countries are reacting in different ways. Some, like Germany and France, are calling for peace and talks, while others, like Poland and the Baltic countries, are getting their armies ready, because they believe that war may come to their borders next. Planes are flying low over towns, soldiers are moving closer to borders, and people are starting to hear a very old and very scary word again: World War. In the United States, a young boy asks his father, "Dad, is another big war going to happen like before?" The father looks at his son and softly replies, "I hope not," but even he is not sure anymore. The truth is, there are too many problems, too many weapons, and too many leaders who want to show their power. This is the world we are living in now, in the year 2025, a world that is full of small fires, small sparks, and growing fears, all waiting to become one huge and uncontrollable flame. It all started with a sound, a loud, terrible siren that echoed across the city, and then, a bright light shot across the sky. People began running in fear, parents grabbed their children, and many tried to hide wherever they could. That day, Tel Aviv, one of the biggest cities in Israel, was under a serious attack. The missiles had come from Iran, and the Iranian government said they were not attacking, but only defending themselves. Israel quickly replied by saying, "This is not defense, this is war." For many years, Iran and Israel had shouted at each other from far away, using words filled with threats, warnings, and secret operations. But now, in 2025, their hidden anger was out in the open for the world to see. The first missile hit an Israeli military base near the city of Haifa, and after that, Israel sent back missile after missile in return, and the sky above the region turned from blue to black as smoke and fire filled the air. In Tehran, the capital of Iran, people watched the news on their TVs. Some people felt proud, believing their country was standing strong, while others were deeply afraid. One mother, with tears in her eyes, whispered to herself, "My son is now a soldier," and she knew he might never come back. In Jerusalem, families sat together in underground shelters, holding each other closely and praying. A little child looked up and asked, "Why do they want to hurt us?" But no one could give a real answer. Both countries continued to send more missiles, more planes, and more troops to the battlefield, and even though the world was watching, nobody was able to stop the violence. The United Nations held meetings, but each powerful country had a different opinion. China said that both Iran and Israel should stop. Russia said Israel started it. The United States said, "We support Israel." And just like that, this was no longer a war between only two countries, it was becoming something bigger, something global, something dangerous. Israel used its most advanced and powerful weapons, including high-tech missiles and defense systems. Iran, on the other hand, used fast drones and long-range rockets that could reach far into Israeli territory. Cyberattacks also became part of the fight, and they were just as painful as bombs. Hospitals lost electricity. Cities were left without power. Computers stopped working. And in the middle of all this, the people, the innocent people, suffered the most. A doctor working in Gaza, where many people are already poor and hurt, said, "We treat everyone, Israeli or Iranian, it doesn't matter. They are all human beings, and they all bleed the same." Even in the darkest and most violent moments, there were still people who showed love, kindness, and care. As the war continued, something unexpected happened. Countries like Saudi Arabia and Egypt, who had been quiet for a long time, began to speak up. Saudi Arabia asked for peace and said, "Let's stop this before it gets worse." Egypt opened its borders to refugees, men, women, and children who had lost their homes. Jordan also asked both sides to calm down. But sadly, their words came too late. The war between Iran and Israel had already opened the door, and behind that door were many other problems, other angry groups, and old histories that were still burning with hate. This first front was just the beginning of something much bigger. And once a war like this begins, no one knows how to stop it or how far it might go. The air was cold, and the early morning was quiet, but the silence felt even colder than the weather. In March 2025, before the sun rose, tanks began to roll across the ground, helicopters flew low in the sky, and thousands of soldiers started to cross another border. The country they were entering was Ukraine, a place that had already seen war before, back in 2022. That war had shocked the world, but this time, it was different. This time, the danger was bigger. Russia said that they were not starting a war, but simply protecting their own land because they believed NATO, a group of Western countries, was moving too close to them. Russian leaders told the world, "We feel surrounded, and we must act now." But many people in other countries saw it differently. They believed Russia was not defending anything, it was expanding. Small countries near Russia, such as Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia, became very worried. These nations had suffered in the past when bigger powers fought nearby, and now they were watching with fear. Soon, Russian troops started holding a military drill in Kaliningrad, a part of Russia that sits between Poland and Lithuania. At first, it looked like just training, but then something changed. NATO radars saw movement, real movement. One radar noticed something. Then another. Then another. People began to wonder if this was the moment when Article 5 of NATO, which says an attack on one member is an attack on all, would be put to the test. In Germany, people waited anxiously. In Poland, tanks moved quickly to the border. France asked for peace talks, hoping to calm the situation before it exploded. Meanwhile, in Moscow, the president of Russia, Vladimir Putin, gave a strong and emotional speech. He said, "The West wants to surround us. They send weapons to Ukraine. They get closer to our home every year. We will not stay quiet anymore." In Washington, the American president sat with generals and military experts to decide what to do. Many people remembered history, how in 1941, a small spark became a world war. Now, the fear was that silence could again turn into fire. Soon after, Russia began a new kind of attack, not with tanks or bombs, but with cyber weapons. In Finland, bank systems crashed. In Slovakia, a hospital lost power. Across Europe, social media became slow and full of strange, false messages. These were not full invasions, but they were clear signs that Russia was testing how far it could go. A top NATO general said something simple but serious: "Russia is watching us. If we blink, they move. If we stand strong, they may stop." But the problem was this: what if both sides stood strong? Russia wanted to take more land and show its strength. NATO wanted to protect its members and show it could not be pushed around. Neither side wanted to step back. In St. Petersburg, a Russian mother cried. She said, "They tell me my son is only training, but I know that training now means war." In Warsaw, the capital of Poland, people filled the streets with signs and shouts. Some said, "No war," while others replied, "Protect Europe." The United States sent 10,000 soldiers to Germany. The United Kingdom sent fighter jets to Poland. Sweden, now officially a NATO member, held emergency meetings. Europe was no longer at peace. It was on the edge. And just like that, the second front of the global conflict had opened. The first was in the Middle East. Now the flames were spreading across Europe. If you looked at a map of the world, parts of it looked like they were on fire. Two big problems: two different regions, but both happening at the same time. Now the big question was, who would try to put out the fire, and who might add more fuel to it? While the world worried, new conversations began. In Moscow, Russian leaders talked secretly with Beijing, the capital of China. At the same time, NATO leaders held talks with allies in Tokyo, Japan. New alliances were forming, new fears were growing, and the war seemed to be expanding. Still, even in the middle of all this, some people hoped that it might stop before it got worse. An old man in Berlin, who had lived through World War II, said, "I saw the bombs. I saw the walls fall. I don't want to see fire again." But now, with two wars burning at the same time, people began to ask, do we even have enough water to stop both fires? The sea is usually a quiet place, where waves rise and fall gently and winds move slowly across the water, but in 2025, the Red Sea became a place of fear and fire. It all began with one missile, then another, both launched from Yemen, flying quickly over the water and shocking the world. People turned their attention to the southern part of the map, to a land full of mountains and deserts, where a group known as the Houthis had taken control of northern Yemen. This group claimed that their attacks were meant to defend Gaza, and they said their actions were a message to Israel and the Western powers. But their missiles didn't stop after one or two, they kept coming, and they didn't just hit military targets. They struck cargo ships, oil tankers, and other vessels carrying food and goods across the sea. Soon, one ship was burning, and another sank below the water. The Red Sea, which had always been a key trade route connecting Asia, Africa, and Europe, was now becoming a battlefield. Saudi Arabia quickly activated its air defenses. Egypt, watching nervously from the north, worried about its shipping routes. The United Arab Emirates even shut down one of its ports to protect its people and ships. In response, the United States launched missiles from its warships, hitting targets inside Yemen where the Houthi attacks were believed to be coming from. But the Houthis refused to back down. They boldly said, "If you attack us, we will strike again," and they made it clear that they were not fighting alone. Behind the scenes, many people started to wonder if Iran was giving them weapons or support, but no one would confirm it, and no one would deny it either. At the same time, Israel, still busy with its war in the north against Iran, sent out a warning. They said, "We will not accept attacks from the south," and made it clear that their patience would not last forever. What was once a peaceful sea filled with red sunsets and quiet ships was now filled with smoke, fire, and the sound of explosions. In nearby countries, people were scared. In Sudan, refugees began to flee their homes. In Djibouti, families stayed indoors and avoided the coastline. In Eritrea, soldiers stood with their weapons, waiting for what might happen next. A poor fisherman in Yemen, with tears in his eyes, looked out at the sea and said, "This was our sea. Now it belongs to war." The shipping lanes, which carried food, medicine, and supplies, were now blocked or delayed. As a result, prices started to go up, not only in Yemen, but also in Europe, Africa, and even parts of Asia that depended on trade through the Red Sea. The war was no longer just about soldiers or battles. It was now affecting the economy, slowing down business, and making life harder for ordinary people across the world. Leaders in Oman made speeches asking for calm. In Qatar, political experts whispered, "There are too many fires, and they are all too close to each other." But the missiles kept coming, and the attacks did not stop. By April 2025, the United States had sent 3 powerful aircraft carriers to the Red Sea, showing the world that it was ready to act if needed. Israel warned again that it might open a new front in the south. Iran did not speak publicly, but it was clear that they were watching closely and planning their next move. And the people? They did what people always do during war: they waited, they listened, and they feared. A father in Jeddah, a city in Saudi Arabia, said, "Every night I hear the sound of planes flying over our home. My little daughter hides under the table. I tell her it's just thunder. But in my heart, I know it's not." The Red Sea, which once connected continents and helped ships move safely from one side of the world to the other, had now become a red line of fire. 3 wars were now burning, in the Middle East, in Europe, and now, in the sea that lies between them. Each war was touching the others. Each fire was feeding the next one. And as the sea burned, people began to ask a difficult question: when the sea itself catches fire, where can the ships go, and where can peace sail? In times of war, people often look at flags and maps to understand which countries are friends and which are enemies, but in 2025, things have become much more complicated, and even the strongest alliances are starting to crack. As 3 different wars burn across the world, in the Middle East, in Eastern Europe, and in the Red Sea, countries are now being forced to make hard choices. Some nations are standing firm with their old partners, while others are changing sides or staying silent. The world is watching, and leaders everywhere are asking the same question: what side are we really on? Turkey finds itself in a confusing and difficult position. It is still a member of NATO, which means it has promises to support the West, but at the same time, it also has good relationships with Iran, and it sells military drones to Ukraine, even while calling Russia a partner. The Turkish president, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, tries to speak in a calm voice to the world, but his message is not always clear, and many leaders are unsure if Turkey can be trusted as a steady partner. In Europe, opinions are also divided. France sends weapons to Israel, while Germany decides to send humanitarian aid like food and medical supplies to Gaza, where many innocent people are suffering. In Spain, people flood the streets in protest, holding up signs that say no war, while others stay silent or confused. Italy, on the other hand, says, "We need energy to survive, and the gas we use comes from places that are now full of war." Even inside the European Union, there are long meetings filled with arguments, and it becomes harder and harder to find one single voice or decision. At the United Nations, the situation is not much better. Many leaders make speeches, but very few take strong actions. Important votes are blocked, and many resolutions are delayed. Russia makes loud statements, blaming the West for everything, while America replies with its own strong words. China, however, remains mostly quiet and watches from the side with a smile, saying little but observing everything. The Arab League meets in Cairo, and even among Arab countries, there is disagreement. Some nations speak in support of Iran, saying that it is defending itself. Others say that chaos is growing too fast and must be stopped. In Africa, countries are also split. Some leaders speak loudly in support of Palestine, while others stay quiet, afraid of taking the wrong side. One African leader says in a public speech, "If we don't choose peace now, the fire will reach our lands, too." Then something unexpected happens. India, which has been silent for many months, suddenly sends a strong message. People around the world begin to ask, what is India planning? Will it take a side? But no one knows for sure, and India's true goals remain a mystery. It becomes clear that old friendships are no longer strong, and old enemies are now shaking hands. One day, a country offers help to its neighbor. The next day, that same country closes its borders and refuses refugees. Even reporters and journalists seem confused. A journalist in Beirut, Lebanon, says on live TV, "We used to know who was on which side. Now, we don't even know who to trust." Even inside NATO, pressure is rising. The United States wants fast and strong action, but not every country agrees. Hungary says no to war. Turkey asks for more time. In Brussels, where NATO's headquarters are located, one diplomat says, "It feels like we are fighting ourselves." Around the world, old friendships are weakening, and people are starting to feel alone. Refugees are running from bombs. Families are searching for truth. But truth is now difficult to find because it looks different to everyone. A young woman in Turkey says, "This is no longer a world of black and white. It is all gray, and full of fire." Leaders stand at microphones and talk about peace, but at the same time, they prepare their armies for war. And the people, the ones who suffer the most, ask themselves quietly, who should we believe? Many people think war is only about bombs, soldiers, and battles, but in the year 2025, the world begins to understand something deeper and more painful, that war is also about money, and money can be used like a weapon that hurts silently but strongly. As the fighting continues in the Middle East, in Europe, and across the Red Sea, prices begin to rise, jobs begin to disappear, and normal life becomes more difficult for people in almost every part of the world. 3 simple words start to feel heavy and dangerous: oil, gas, and trade. These are no longer just business terms. Now, they are tools in a war that is not only about power, but also about survival. It all begins in the Gulf region, where oil is produced and sent across the globe. When missiles land near oil fields, workers run, machines stop, and shipments are delayed. At the same time, cargo ships are attacked in the Red Sea, and the sea lanes that carry food, fuel, and medicine become blocked or slowed down. As a result, the prices of oil and gas rise very fast. In Europe, people begin to feel the change. Gas becomes so expensive that some families cannot afford to heat their homes. Factories that depend on energy close their doors. A man in Germany says with sadness, "Now I stand in line for food stamps. I never thought I would see this day." Across the ocean, in Asia, big factories that once made goods for the world now sit in silence, waiting for parts that are stuck at sea or lost in bombings. Even China, which is usually strong and rich, begins to feel the pressure. The government speaks calmly on TV, but inside the markets, businesses are nervous and investors are afraid. In the United States, things are not much better. The stock market drops, companies lay off workers, and the banks warn people to prepare for a long and difficult winter. The dollar, once the strongest currency, now struggles to stay on top. Behind closed doors, countries like Saudi Arabia begin to talk about selling oil in currencies other than the US dollar. This idea is not just strange, it is dangerous, because if it happens, it could change the balance of power in the financial world. Meanwhile, food is becoming more expensive, moving more slowly, and filled with fear. In Africa and Latin America, where many people already live with very little, hunger becomes more serious. A mother in Kenya cries, "We are not part of this war, but still, my children are the ones who suffer the most." Even technology companies, which once seemed untouchable, now begin to feel the pain. In the middle of all this, the famous businessman Elon Musk posts a message online: "Peace is not free, but war is too expensive to survive." His words reflect what many are now feeling. The stock markets act like battlegrounds, one day rising in hope, the next day crashing in fear. Small businesses close forever. Big companies struggle to survive. A CEO in London says, "I used to sell software, but now all I sell is fear." At the same time, governments around the world start printing more money to deal with the crisis. But that only makes things worse. Inflation begins to rise. The cost of everything goes up. And people who already have little now have even less. Protests begin to fill the streets, not just against war, but against hunger, against job loss, against broken promises. People don't just want peace between countries, they want peace in their own homes. And yet, even while people are suffering, the war machines do not stop. Every missile that flies through the air costs millions of dollars. Every drone used in battle could have built a school or a hospital, but instead, it brings more fire and fear. A student sitting in a quiet cafe in Brazil asks out loud, if our leaders really cared about peace, wouldn't they be building hospitals instead of buying tanks? But money, it seems, does not have a heart. It only follows direction. And right now, in 2025, that direction is heading toward danger. Nations keep borrowing money. People keep falling into poverty. Debt becomes a heavy burden for countries and families. And hope, the one thing people try to hold on to, becomes more expensive every day. In the end, as the world's economy weakens and families suffer everywhere, one question grows louder: if war destroys the economy for all, who really wins? While the world focused on the north, looking at the battle between Russia and NATO, and while many others paid attention to the war between Israel and Iran, most people forgot to look south, until the danger came from there. In the early part of 2025, a missile launched from Yemen flew across the Red Sea and hit a cargo ship. That one attack carried a loud message for the whole world: we are part of this war, too. The Houthis, a rebel group in northern Yemen, stepped into the global crisis not with quiet words or protests, but with fire, force, and fear. They already controlled important mountains, cities, and ports. Now, they were controlling something else: the attention of the world. Shipping routes, which are the bloodline of global trade, began to shut down. The Red Sea, a sea that connects the east to the west and carries oil, gas, food, and goods, was no longer safe. In just 1 week, 10 ships were hit. Some of them burned. Some of them sank. All of them lost. As oil shipments stopped and cargo was delayed, the world economy began to shake. A Saudi fighter pilot said, "This is no longer just about a small rebel group. This is part of something much bigger." But people still had questions. Where were the Houthis getting their weapons? Were they supported by Iran? Were other countries helping them secretly? Nobody gave a clear answer, but one fact was obvious: Yemen was now part of the global war map. In response to the attacks, Israel, still busy fighting Iran in the north, sent missiles and drones toward the south. They targeted Houthi positions across deserts and hills. The Houthis replied with their own message: "You help Gaza's enemies. You support the West. Now you will feel our fire." And indeed, they brought it. Fires rose above the sea. Ships started to avoid the Red Sea altogether. Insurance companies said it was too dangerous to travel through that area, and that made shipping even more expensive. Everything, from electronics to food, took longer to arrive. And when goods arrived late, they also cost more. The whole world began to feel the pressure. Then, something shocking happened. An American warship sailing in the Red Sea was hit by a drone. The ship didn't sink, but the message from the attackers was loud and clear: your power ends here. Now, the United States paid close attention. Soldiers were moved to nearby bases. Plans were made in secret rooms. Yet, the U.S. president at that time said, "We don't want to start a new war, but we also won't close our eyes." In Yemen, the people were tired and scared. Schools closed. Markets were empty. One father said, "We are not fighters. We are just tired." But the Houthis kept telling their people, "We fight for pride, land, and faith." Still, many citizens began to wonder silently, at what cost? In Europe, leaders feared that things were getting worse. The Red Sea was an important waterway for their trade, too. Countries like France and Italy sent their navy ships, but they made it clear that they did not want to get pulled into another war. On the other side of the world, China watched everything carefully. They did not send weapons or soldiers, but they traded quietly and used the situation to their advantage. The people, however, continued to suffer. There were shortages of food, delays in medicine, and a complete lack of safety. The Red Sea, once known for peaceful sunsets and international shipping, was now a red zone of warning and fear. The world once thought of Yemen as a poor and quiet place, full of problems but far from the global stage. Now, it was at the center of a growing storm. And so, the world began to ask, how did we not see this coming? But maybe the better question was, did we hear the storm coming and just choose to ignore it? While the world focused on battles with tanks, bombs, and missiles, something else was happening, something silent, something invisible, but just as dangerous. In 2025, a new kind of war began, one that did not start with explosions in the sky, but with a small flicker on a screen, a computer freezing, or a phone that suddenly stopped working. No one heard gunfire, but entire cities felt the damage. This was the beginning of the cyber war, and it affected hospitals, banks, airports, and homes, all without a single bomb. In New York, the subway system suddenly stopped. In Paris, people could not pay for groceries because the payment machines were down. In Tel Aviv, emergency alarms screamed, but there were no rockets, it was just a false alert caused by hackers. Behind these digital attacks were people with keyboards, not guns. Some worked for governments like Iran or Russia. Some were just individuals sitting alone in basements. Some wanted power. Others wanted money. And some simply wanted to cause chaos. But whoever they were, their actions were powerful. A single line of computer code could shut down a hospital, crash a bank, or spread lies across an entire nation. Israel shouted, "We are under attack." Iran shouted back, "You are the ones attacking us." And strangely, both were right. Cyber weapons don't move in only one direction. They attack both ways, and both sides suffer. Israeli hackers shut off power in parts of Tehran. Iranian hackers sent thousands of fake messages to Israeli phones. People became confused. Was the information real or fake? Was the threat outside their house or already inside their phones? In a world where people get news from screens, confusion became a weapon. Truth became hard to find. In Washington, the U.S. military noticed something strange. Computers slowed down. Emails disappeared. Satellites blinked. A general looked worried and said, "This is not war with bullets, but it feels like we've already been hit." Soon after, even China was attacked. Its banks froze. Its lights flickered. The government did not speak about it openly, but the people knew something had gone wrong. Cyber experts began to call this the new battlefield, one without tanks or soldiers, only silence and digital fire. In Moscow, hackers celebrated their success, but the Russian government said nothing. Silence was part of their plan. In the Middle East, people lost faith in what they saw on TV or social media. They no longer knew who to trust. And when people stop believing in the truth, even peace becomes impossible. A woman in Beirut said, "They don't need to bomb our homes. They just need to confuse our minds." Schools started to close, not because of danger outside, but because of broken systems inside. Students stayed home. Classes disappeared. The war was no longer only on the battlefield, it had reached living rooms, phones, and classrooms. Some hackers were fighting for their countries. Some were fighting for money. Some weren't fighting for anything, they just wanted to watch the world fall apart. And the most frightening thing of all? One teenager with a laptop could now do more damage than 10 tanks. World leaders held emergency meetings to talk about new rules for cyber war. But who would follow them? And who could punish those who attacked from the shadows? At the United Nations, the arguments continued. Every country blamed the other. And while they talked, more systems were attacked. The Internet, which once connected the world with hopes of peace and education, had now become a powerful weapon. And no one, no matter where they lived, was safe from it. A journalist in Dubai said, "Even you, watching from your phone, are on the battlefield now." This is not science fiction. This is real. This is today. And in a world where the truth becomes the main target, we must ask, who will protect it? The world is now holding its breath. Cities that were once full of life and noise are quiet. Markets that were busy with buying and selling have frozen. Families who once spoke of weekend plans now whisper prayers for safety. And in powerful rooms behind closed doors, world leaders are getting ready, not for peace, but for the worst. The war has already touched almost every corner of the earth. From Iran and Israel to Russia and Ukraine, from the Red Sea to Europe, from Washington to Beijing, nobody feels safe anymore. Some countries are hoping the fighting will stop. But others are preparing for a war unlike any before. In the Middle East, the bombs stop for a short time, but the air still feels heavy. People look at the sky, not to admire its beauty, but to see if new missiles are coming. They ask, is this a break, or is something worse waiting for us? In Washington, the president speaks to the people and says, "We do not want war, but we will not stay silent." In Tehran, a powerful cleric replies, "We are ready to die, but we will never be controlled." These are two countries with very different beliefs and goals, but now they are standing on the same thin red line. And that line is shaking. But something new begins to happen. Voices rise, not from governments, but from regular people. In Tel Aviv, a father who already lost his brother to the war says, "I don't want my son to die too." In Qom, a mother whispers, "They told us we are fighting for God, but I just want my son to come home." These voices do not sound like enemies. They sound like humans, afraid, tired, and broken. They no longer want to fight. They want peace. But the question remains, will the leaders listen to their people? In Moscow, Russia watches carefully, looking for a chance to gain more power. In Ankara, Turkey tries to speak with both sides, but no one seems to listen. In Berlin, London, and Delhi, leaders keep their eyes on the Middle East, hoping for peace, but preparing for more war. Even Saudi Arabia, a powerful country in the region, finally speaks loudly, "We need peace now, or we all lose." But peace is not easy. There have been too many lies, too many deaths, and too much anger. People have lost trust, and trust is the first thing needed for peace. Then, something unexpected happens. A secret message is leaked to the public. It shows that American and Iranian officers have met in a private meeting. Could this mean a new beginning? A journalist writes, "For the first time in weeks, I hear a little bit of hope." But many people still don't believe it. Some think it's a trick. Some want revenge more than peace. A man in Gaza says, "They always talk about peace, but we keep suffering." A student in New York posts online, "This war isn't just theirs, it's ours too. It's in our minds, our screens, and our futures." This war is no longer just about missiles or cyberattacks. It is about power, fear, faith, pride, and control. It is about who leads the world, and who gets to decide what truth looks like. It is about history, and also about the future. Will we learn from the mistakes of the past, or will we repeat them again? That is the most important question. And it's not a question for generals or presidents. It's a question for all of us. Because wars do not begin only with weapons, they begin with choices. And peace, too, must begin with the same. Now the world must decide, if you had to choose between power and peace, what would you fight for? Now the story has been told. We have followed the world as it walked through fire, fear, and confusion. We saw how one spark in one country could light a fire in another. We watched as nations made speeches, sent weapons, and moved soldiers. We heard the cries of children, the whispers of mothers, and the silence of leaders who didn't know what to say. The world in 2025 became a place of heavy choices. Some chose to fight. Some chose to hide. Some chose to speak. But most people just wanted peace. This was not only a war of guns or drones. It was also a war of truth, of money, of friendship, and of belief. It showed how connected we all are. A ship sinking in the Red Sea could raise the price of bread in Europe. A cyber attack in one country could shut down hospitals in another. And while governments talked about strength, the people suffered in silence. But there is still something powerful left: choice. Even in the middle of war, there is a chance to choose something better. Peace is not weak. Peace is not quiet. Peace is brave. Peace is strong. Peace begins with people who ask questions, who listen, and who believe that tomorrow can be different from today. You, the listener, are part of that choice too. So, now we ask you, not just as a learner of English, but as a human being. If you had to choose between power and peace, what would you fight for? Backhand index pointing right if this story made you think, helped you learn, or touched your heart. Please like the video, leave a comment sharing your thoughts, and subscribe to English Tone for more stories that teach English with emotion, meaning, and simple words. Question of the day: what does peace mean to you? Tell us in the comments, we'd love to hear your voice.